Am I the a-hole for taking back our groceries that my wife gave to her sister? Original post. My wife, 30, has a younger sister, 28, with 4 kids. My sister-in-law is a married stay-at-home mom, and her husband, 31, works 35 hours per week. Money's tight for them, but they still go on annual vacations, drive newer cars, etc. My wife and I keep separate finances, except for a joint credit card and household bill. I also do most of the grocery shopping. This is relevant for later. A couple years ago, I found out my wife had been buying groceries for my sister-in-law in our joint card, about $150 to $200 per month for a few months. She said that her sister had come to her saying they were tight on money, and that she needed help feeding their kids. This about a month after they had got back from their most recent vacation in Mexico. I told my wife, in no uncertain terms, that I am not supporting their family. She argued with me, saying that we could more than afford it. I replied that I don't care if she wanted to support them, but that's her business. My wife stopped buying them groceries in our joint card after, but I'm sure she told her sister, because sister-in-law has been standoffish since. In the last few months, grocery costs have been increasing thanks to inflation. So as a cost-saving measure, I bought a whole cow for about $4,000, which works out to about $9 per pound and will last us more than a year. And my wife and I split the cost. Yesterday, I went to the freezer to pull some steaks and saw the amount of beef was visibly lower. I checked our security cameras and saw my wife leaving the house with a big box. I texted her demanding to know if she had taken a bunch of our meat to sister-in-law, and she replied yes. I grabbed sister-in-law's keys as we have a copy, drove to their house, knocked on her door, and when sister-in-law answered, I told her that I was taking back what my wife brought over. Sister-in-law protested, saying I was taking food out of her kids' mouths, but I said I don't care. She already had one roast in the oven. I went to their freezer and they had about 40 to 50 pounds of ground beef, steaks, and roasts from our cow, including a couple prime rib roasts. I grabbed it all except the roast in the oven and drove home. My wife yelled at me, saying she couldn't believe how selfish I was, and that sister-in-law called her crying. She also said that she paid for half of it, and so she could do whatever she liked with it. I yelled back, saying you don't get to decide to give away anything that we pay for together, and said she acted like a sneak thief for doing it behind my back. My wife is still angry at me and says until I apologize to her sister, return the meat that I took back, and apologize for calling her a thief, she won't speak to me. I may be the a-hole because my wife pays half the groceries. Now for the top comments before reading the update. I think that sister-in-law is lying to your wife. They take vacations. How does your wife not see that she's playing her? Next, if she's really hurting for food, there is help out there. Not the a-hole. But you shouldn't have called your wife a thief. She was, in her mind, helping. His wife is stealing from his family. She is a thief. It's her family too. Then she shouldn't eat anything at home, since she is giving away her share of it. If she wants to help that much, use her money. Opie said they have separate finances, not with the household. Being charitable with someone else's money is so much easier. Not the a-hole, but at this point, I would get another fridge and lock it with my own food and go separate on groceries as well. Not the a-hole. Die on this hill if need be. At least you'll have more cow to eat. Agreed. You're not responsible for their family, especially when they can afford other wants, not needs. Yep. The fact that sister-in-law can't afford basic groceries but can take full-on trips abroad shows she actually has the money to afford groceries, but has made a decision not to as she knows she has a backup. A little harsh for calling his wife a thief, but I would not budge on not helping with food. Maybe find all the resources that can help feed their family for them that doesn't affect yours. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And this is that case while sister-in-law's family is spending unwisely for their financial situation. Now for the update. Thanks for all the comments/suggestions/criticisms. Regardless of the vote, consensus is my reaction and behavior was suboptimal, which I agreed was. I apologized to my wife for calling her a thief, and that I would apologize to her sister for going over to her house in a huff and upsetting her, but said I won't apologize for taking back the meat which we paid for jointly. I laid it all out and said that my position on me not buying groceries for their family hadn't changed. I said her husband only works 3 days a week, 12-hour shifts, and if they're struggling for food, he needs to pick up more shifts. I also said taking vacations and having new cars is a luxury they can't afford if I have to pitch in to pay for their food. As some of you suggested, I asked my wife, why aren't you buying groceries with your own money if you want to support them? My wife responded she's been buying them groceries for the past couple years with her own money because they're up to their eyeballs in loans and credit card debt. But inflation means their groceries have been costing her more and more. She then admitted to putting some things in our joint credit card in the last few months in smaller amounts than 2 years ago, so I wouldn't notice. As for the beef, sister-in-law called her this past weekend crying, saying they needed help to the end of the month with food because one of the kids broke their iPad, which they used to keep the kids entertained, and so they replaced it. She didn't ask me about taking them beef because she knew I would say no if she told me about the iPad. I didn't think I would notice since we have so much beef. She said I have no idea how hard it is to raise 4 kids, and they need an iPad. I told her we need to go see a counselor because we're on different planets if she thinks an iPad is a necessity. So yeah, we're going to do therapy. Until then, I'm sleeping in the basement. To answer some common questions, why doesn't sister-in-law's husband work more or sister-in-law get a job? He does shift work 3 days a week, 12-hour shifts. He likes it because it frees him up to spend more time with the kids. Sister-in-law has never had a job beyond serving as a teenager. Why don't you put a lock on your freezer? I would like to stay married, and I'm certain if I did this, I wouldn't be married for very long. Did sister-in-law and her husband pay for their vacations and cars themselves? I still don't know, but my guess would be credit cards and car loans, if they're up to their eyeballs in debt, as my wife said. Why don't you compromise in helping them? A fair compromise to me, if I were to pitch in, would be for them to better manage their money, as in not going on annual vacations to Mexico. The last time I raised that, my wife said I was being judgmental. Maybe I'll propose it again in counseling. What Opie's wife doesn't seem to understand is that she isn't helping her sister pay for food and necessities. She's helping her sister pay for multiple new cars and tropical vacations and other luxuries. I don't quite get how she doesn't see that. If she wasn't subsidizing her sister's family with all that cash, they would have to spend the new car money on food instead. Exactly. She's not paying for their needs. She's paying for their wants. It's worse. She is actively preventing her sister to learn how to manage money. I am not sure if Opie's wife understands managing money herself that well. What's with indulging her sister for years, jumbling priorities of food and iPads, and thinking her husband wouldn't notice when months' worth of meat were gone? You're being judgmental. Yes, exactly. He's judging them on their inability to manage their money because they keep leeching off of his. And it's right to do so. The kid broke an iPad, so they used grocery money to pay for a replacement? Get lost. This garbage enrages me, as someone who has to go to the freaking food bank to feed my kids when I was working 60 to 72 hours a week, being garnished to hell because of being scammed by ITT Tech. Not only that, but husband specifically works less to spend time with the kids. Yet they need an iPad to keep the kids entertained? None of this makes sense. A friend's brother and his ex are the type to let their kids have unrestricted tech access so they don't have to bother parenting. And the parents are on their own phones, /computers, /consoles 24/7 when they are not working. Not that they can keep a job for long anyway. I feel bad for the Opie though. Wife is enabling this horrible behavior because the sister is guilt-tripping her through the kids. Next story. Am I the a-hole for calling the cops and causing him to be taken in for taking my car and using it while I was sleeping? So, I've been seeing this guy 30 male Kevin for several months now. We'd visit each other weekly, and last week he spent the night with me. Next morning I woke up 9 a.m. and couldn't find him nor my car. I searched for my car key that was at the bottom drawer in my son's room. I usually hide it in there and no one knows about this secret place, but couldn't find it. I freaked out and tried calling Kevin, but his phone was dead, so I ended calling the police after waiting for like 10 minutes. Shortly after, I discovered that Kevin was found with my car at the supermarket's parking lot. He was taken in by authorities and the car was returned. He was fuming at me, saying I should have not called the cops because he took the car to go buy his breakfast. In my defense, I said he never asked for my permission, and I never gave him the okay to drive it. He argued that he thought I wouldn't mind, much less escalate and call the cops after he's done a nice thing for me and my son. He said he never had issues with cops, But because of me, now they thought he was a thief. We haven't talked since then. His brother keeps berating me, saying I messed up and acted stupidly. Am I the a-hole for freaking out and calling the cops? I didn't even know how he got the key. Now for the top comments. Not the a-hole. Excuse me, has he been snooping in your child's room? Red flag. Yeah, this is where I'm hung up. Was your kid sleeping in his room when Kevin just started rummaging through his drawers? So Kevin was trying to do a nice thing for Opie and her son, which indicates that the son was home. But then she's really worried about a car and not so much about the fact that this guy was searching her child's room while Opie, and possibly her son, slept? He was fuming at me, saying I should not have called the cops because it took the car to go buy us breakfast. And to top it off, is anyone buying this excuse? Not the a-hole. That seems to be the go-to excuse when a guy steals something in the morning. Remember the guy who stole his girlfriend's debit card to buy breakfast? Now I'm wondering if that was a cover story too. Forget him literally stealing your car, but what was he doing in your son's room where I'm assuming your son was sleeping? Rifling through his stuff while you weren't able to intervene because you were sleeping. This guy's a creep, and you need to keep him away from your son. He sounds like a hardcore predator. Protect your child and keep this man away from your family. Not the a-hole. Also, I highly doubt Kevin was getting you breakfast. I bet he was meeting someone in that parking lot for an exchange of something, which is why he was angry cops were involved, and he tried to flip the script and make himself look like the victim. I'm telling you, he is up to no good. Yeah, I hope Opie will come back and clarify whether or not her son was asleep in his room, because let me tell you, if an adult male was in my child's room for an extended period of time, while my child and I both slept, I'd be calling the cops in my way less than 10 minutes, and not because of my car. Last story. Am I the a-hole for not punishing my child for a simple mistake and kicking my sister out? So I, 30 female, have a little girl, 6 female. I grew up in an environment where every mistake was punishable. Dropped ice cream? No more for the rest of the month. Accidentally broke something? Grounded. So when I had my child, I swore I wouldn't punish her severely unless it was very big. So my sister, 34 female, lost her job, so I opened my doors to her and her son, 7 male. It's been going pretty okay, but I recently noticed how whenever her son would make a mistake, he'd act like it was the end of the world. For example, he and my daughter were playing tag in the house, and they accidentally knocked over a vase. I heard a crash from my office at home, and when I came, my nephew started bawling and saying he was sorry. I asked him if they were both okay, and told him that next time don't run around in the house. He looked at me in confusion before running off when he heard his mother coming. I thought that was really weird, but shrugged it off and cleaned up the mess. So last week, I took the kids to the park and my sister tagged along. I bought some ice cream for the both of them and watched them while they played. I needed to go to the bathroom, so I asked my sister to please watch the two of them while I was gone. She obliged. I come back and my daughter is crying. Her ice cream is on the ground and my sister is yelling at her while my nephew is also crying. I ask what is wrong, and my sister tells me that while running around despite my sister telling her not to, my daughter dropped her ice cream. My daughter then said that my nephew was chasing her with a worm on a stick, so she was trying to run away from him. I check up on her to make sure she hadn't hurt herself before exploding on my sister. I yelled saying she had no right to yell at my child, while she said she was just making sure my daughter didn't grow up to be a brat, seeing as I don't punish her. I told her I make sure my daughter learns from her mistakes. I'd only discipline her if it's warranted. I then told her to leave my house, to which she did the very next day. Now, I'm getting messages from my family asking me how could I turn away my sister and her son when they had nowhere to go, and I'm heartless. I feel really bad since her son did nothing wrong. So am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. You're doing right by your girl, and you're breaking the cycle of harm, which I can personally attest is extremely difficult to do. Your sister, on the other hand, is continuing the cycle, and her poor little guy sounds terrified of her. That poor boy is going to grow up to hate his mother. That's sad. Hopefully, because that will mean he got out. Too many kids who are treated like this never get out of the dynamic. Or won't have kids at all, out of fear of inflicting them with the same toxic dynamic from childhood. Like me. Mistreated children become abusive parents. It is a cycle that some break out of, but most people do not. It sounds like you did and your sister didn't. Protecting your daughter from that is a priority. If screaming is sister's opening pitch when something goes wrong, it is hard to expect her not to do that again. It'll be reflex. Also, she sees you as a falling down on the job and that it is her place to fix matters. This is not a good situation. Normally, I detest support family no matter what arguments, but you haven't described her as being someone you've avoided, someone you couldn't get along with. For the sake of your nephew, maybe try and talk to her. Hey, mom and dad may have not been the best at parenting. I don't want to repeat their mistakes. While you are here, let's try something different. Maybe you overreacted, but it was in defense of your daughter. I can't bring myself to call someone the a-hole for trying to be a better parent. I guess see if there's a way to be a better sister without compromising that, not the a-hole. Saying most victims turns around and do it themselves is only perpetuating a stereotype that works to stigmatize victims. I'm not saying victims can't become perpetrators, but saying most do is wrong. It only makes things harder for victims. If you look it up, there's actually also research that shows victims as a child end up facing more of it as adults. This is what drove me crazy whenever people found out about my horrible mother and assured me that it wasn't really her fault. That's how her mother treated her, without knowing anything about the situation. My maternal grandmother who raised me was a saint and was blamed by others for my mother's poor choices and behavior until she died. She probably blamed herself too when she did nothing wrong. The fault rests with the abuser alone.